Big Boy's
Big
Neighborhood.
Boy.
Now, I really want to take this time to. I don't know where I started because there's so much ground that I think we need to cover. But the first thing I'm going to say, man, is that there's a documentary called Sugartown. And this documentary, Sugartown, is on Investigation Discovery, ID channel. And I had a chance to, I watch a lot of documentaries. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't watch a lot of scripted television shows, so on and so forth. But when I had a chance to see this one and the story, for one, I knew a little bit of the story. And then once I started to watch Sugartown, you do get kind of a recall where you're like, man, I remember that. But also what I love is that for what we're about to get into is that the fight didn't stop, that it continues. And in the neighborhood now, I have Victor White. And Victor White, thank you for coming to the neighborhood. Welcome to the neighborhood. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you all for having us.
Man, it is our pleasure. And also Carol Powell and Lexing.
Yes.
All righty. And for one, first off, I want to start with your story, Mr. White. Your son, Victor, if you can give us a backstory on your son, Lil Vic.
Sure. Lil Vic I moved down to New Iberia.
And that's Louisiana?
Yeah, New Iberia, Louisiana in 2008. There was a riot. Actually, the Sheriff's Department in Iberia Parish, they were tear gassed women and children doing a sugarcane festival that is held every year. And so the sheriff at that time brought me down to, I consulted with them, and my job was to bridge the gap between the Sheriff's Department and the community, the West End that was called at that time. And so I brought the Vic and my other son, so we finally did move them down there. And they enjoyed it. One of my sons actually married someone from New Iberia. So we stayed there, and then Sheriff Akal, the current sheriff, he got elected in 2008. And the work that I was doing down there, we were doing mentoring, and Lil Vic played an important role of that mentoring, and was out there in the community actually providing other services, tutoring, mentoring, and substance abuse services and prevention. And they were instrumental in doing that and walking the streets. Well, Sheriff Akal got elected, and he said he didn't see a need for where we were, that the individuals, the thing that was going on, it was ingrained in them, and so therefore he discontinued the services. So then we seen the police, and then Lil Vic and we'll walk in the festival, and you would see the police harassing people. They hadn't experienced that from where we was from. They hadn't experienced that, and so he seen that, and so we seen it start getting kind of bad. So we moved, and in the middle of the night, I decided I better move, because to protect my children at that time. Well, Lil Vic, girlfriend had a child, and they were from Jeanerette, 15 miles outside of New Iberia, Louisiana. So they moved back down there, and that was in October. And then in March, he encountered the police, and again, he was killed.
Now, there's so much to the story of Lil Vic being killed. Now, you could, as you're watching the documentary, or if you just read, it seemed like it was so obvious, Carol, what happened. Right. And to sit there and watch it and say, okay, something else is going on, because they're continuing this fight. So even as I'm sitting there watching it and watching indictments and everything, I'm like, this is not going to end well.
Right.
Now, for Lil Vic, that day he was walking to the store, and he got to the store, and they said that there was an altercation that was going on outside of the store. Correct, Carol?
That's correct.
All right.
That's correct. They said that an altercation was going on outside the store. Lil Vic had nothing to do with the altercation. He and his friend got their snacks, started walking back to their home, and they were approached and stopped by the police. In fact, the police even was satisfied with the fact that they had not been involved in the fight, although the police did not go to the Hop-In store to investigate and look at the video, which they were only a block away, to actually verify whether he was or was not involved in the fight. But the police himself was satisfied that he wasn't involved in the fight. But what he did is something that he should not have done. He made an illegal search. He told Lil Vic and his friends that I'm going to search you, and if I don't find anything illegal on you, and if you don't have any warrants, I'm gonna let you go. And see, right then he had no probable cause, because the reason that he allegedly stopped Lil Vic was because they received a call
About
that he
the
was
fight.
involved in a fight, which he was not involved in a fight. So right then and there, that's where everything started going downhill, because the police illegally conducted a search on Lil Vic that he should not have done. And had he not done that, we may not even be here discussing this case today. And that's where the train went off the rails, because the police officer then began this illegal search. He sat Lil Vic and his friend in front of the police car, and he kept them there for over 90 minutes, over a long and extensive period of time, which was way more than what we call a Terry search, where you just supposed to pat down a person if you think that they have a weapon on them. But that was not the case, because he was already satisfied that Lil Vic hadn't been involved in the fight and he hadn't done anything. But it just seems like at this particular point, he decided that he was going to go beyond what the law required him to do, and he kept Lil Vic. He let the friend go, kept Lil Vic. He did a very thorough search of his pockets inside and out twice. And then he decided he was going to find a bag of weed. Okay. If you can find a dime bag of weed, then you know you didn't have a gun on him. Okay. And then all of a sudden he alleged that something else that he found, that we contested, that he did not have any cocaine on him. That was a plant.
Right.
That was just, the whole thing was a plant.
And Reverend White, your son Lil Vic was apprehended by the police. They put him in the car now, and they take him to the police station. Where does it go from him being on the curb, in the streets, sat down for 90 minutes, and then they put him in the car and they take him to the police station?
Sure, and then the friend called Leonard, which is my son, and Leonard called me and told me that the police had Lil Vic, and the friend said, told him to call me. So what I did is I called Iberia Parish Sheriff Department that night. It was about 10:41, between 10:41 and 11 o'clock that night, and they called me. So I called the Sheriff's Department, and they told me they didn't have him in custody. So then I called the actual jail, the detention center, and asked them, did they have him in custody? They told me no. I also asked them, well, okay, was he en route? And normally when they take him en route, they can tell me that he's en route. Well, they told me, no, he wasn't en route, that they didn't even have him. He wasn't detained. So, at that time, me and my wife, I told her, well, they probably let him go. They probably let him go, and so we didn't have to worry about that. Well, come 5:41 Monday morning, that's when we get the call. Leonard calls me back and say, Daddy, well, we just, a detective just came, picked me up, questioned me, and told me that Lil Vic was dead, and they want to talk to you. So then I called the Sheriff's Department again. I called Iberia Parish Sheriff's Department. I said, okay, well, do y'all have my son? I'm calling about my son. So then they directed me to the Louisiana State Police Criminal Investigation Division. They transferred me over. They didn't know what I was talking about. They said, well, no, we have no knowledge. Then they transferred, I called back to the Iberia Parish Sheriff's Department, and that went on for about 20 to 30 minutes, all the way to close, longer than that. It was like 7 o'clock. So then Katie Morrell of the State Police Criminal Investigation Division, she called me, and she said, well, Mr. White, your son, Victor White III, is deceased, and we need you to come to New Iberia. We want you to hurry up, but be careful. And so that time, which New Iberia from where I live was 2 hours. So it was a 2-hour drive. Didn't tell my wife because I already knew what was going to happen.
And
so
your wife, you're driving together, you and your wife.
And my other children, correct.
Right.
I have 9 kids, and Lil Vic was, Lil Vic was actually number 8 of those 9. So as we was going down, and I told my son also, don't call your mother, don't tell your mother, just wait till we get to New Iberia. So as we was going, we drove to New Iberia, and I was telling why she kept saying, what's going on? I would say, well, no, just, it's about Lil Vic, yeah, but, let's wait till we get to New Iberia. So when we get to New Iberia, we were driving up. That's when I told my wife, look, that Lil Vic was deceased. But they wouldn't tell me all. They kept telling me that we had to run around. So I called Katie Morrell. I want to see my son's body. She told me, no. I said, actually, so, okay, well, how y'all know that's my son? So she said, we identified him by his state-issued or Louisiana ID. Later, the suspect was up by that part. So I said, okay, where's my son's body? I want to see my son. How do y'all know it's my son? So she told me no, and she said he was at the Iberia Medical Center. I drove to the hospital, And while at the hospital, they denied me the right again to see my son. So they'll talk to the administrator. I even talked to the doctor that triaged my son. And they still tell me they could not tell me anything about my son. Even though I was the next of kin, they couldn't give me any information. They was under investigation. So finally, I got in touch with the coroner, and then they told me yes. But here's the stipulation. They told me, we'll let you see your son. But before that, they told me he was being transferred to the forensic lab for an autopsy. I said, well, no, I want to make sure it's my son. So it took about another hour. Then they called me about an hour, and they called me and said, well, look, we decided we're going to let you see your son, but here's the stipulation. Only one person can go back, and you can only see your son from the neck up.
Wouldn't let his mom go back and see.
No.
What?
No. Would not deny
You can
that.
only see him from the neck up.
From the neck up.
Wouldn't let your wife, his mother, go see her deceased son.
Nope.
Now, when you do get back there, Reverend White, what do you see? Now, I remember they said you couldn't touch him, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Well, the first thing I see when they open the door, when they actually opened the door, I could see that my son had been beaten. First thing I seen was the lip was swollen. I seen that he had a mark, and this is way off. I was a way off from him, and they had, I could see that part on the left side of his eyebrow. That was a mark that went from the left side of the eyebrow all the way down below his jawbone.
Like a horseshoe.
Yes. And I even asked him. I asked the detective. That was the Lieutenant Trahan. I asked him. I said, "Well, what happened to my son?" He said, "I can't tell you. It's under investigation." No. Then he said, "Well, okay, you can ask the coroner." So when I asked the coroner looked over at the state trooper. He said, "Well, I can't tell you. It's under investigation." He told me to ask him. So as we were going back, I had to sign saying that it was my son. Well, one of the officers at that time even asked me, "Well, how did he get here?" So I told him, I don't know. But then Lieutenant Trahan said, well, no, don't worry about that. So that's where we left, and I signed. At that time, they had admitted my wife to the hospital to sedate her, and so, but the coroner, he looked, he was standing there for about 5 minutes, looking at me and saying, y'all need to, you need to kind of look into this. Well, I can't tell you this. He kept saying, I can't tell you this. I really can't tell you, and I'm trying to say, okay, what is it that you can't tell me, But even before that, when I seen my son, I was doing his last rites. My son was telling me, "Daddy, don't let this go. Don't let this go. We need to take this further." And my son was talking to me, and I knew no matter what happened that we would. And so at that point, when I come back, I called Tony Brown, which was a local radio host that we were a friend prior to this, and I knew the work that he was doing. So I called him, and also with Attorney Cal Paul Lexing with the Gina 6 because we were all there. So I asked him how could I get in touch with her. And that's why I said that day, because I knew if we wouldn't have done anything that day, they would have set the narrative. Because, mind you, there had been 8 unexplained deaths at the same time. And the sheriff was in power, 8. And I wasn't going to let my son be the 9th.
Right. And the cover-up begun.
And you say that this is where it's just beginning.
Because at that particular point on March the 3rd, later on that day, the Louisiana State Police released a press statement saying that, they always try to villainize the victim.
Mm-hmm.
So they released a statement saying that he had been shot in the back while handcuffed in the back, sitting in the police cruiser, when in fact he had no bullet wounds in his back. We didn't find out that he didn't have any bullet wounds in his back until 5 months later when the coroner released their report and said, well, no, he couldn't have shot himself in the back while he's handcuffed in the back. He shot himself in the chest while he's handcuffed in the chest. While he's handcuffed in the back. He shot himself, which made absolutely no sense.
So it already made no sense. And
Correct.
then
it got worse.
Worse.
It just went.
Then it made nonsense.
Nonsense.
So they're saying that at first he was sitting in the back seat.
Yeah.
Alrighty, that he was handcuffed
Behind
and
his
shot
back.
behind his back in the back seat. Shot himself in the back at first. Alrighty, and before he shot himself, he said some words to them that they said he was like, tell my family I love them or something. And
they
gone.
concocted that story that he said, tell my family I'm gone. I love them.
Now, this isn't a man that's got 3 strikes or he's going away for murder or you know what I'm saying?
No, he hadn't done anything. Had no warrants. As a matter of fact, when they stopped him, the police ran both the young men's through the system, and they had no warrants. They had nothing. So there was no reason why to even hold him. He had no warrants. So He should not never been in the back seat of that police
So Reverend
cruiser.
White,
He was getting ready to buy a car. He had the down payment for his apartment, and we had just completed his FAFSA so that he could go to the local technical school to become an underwater welder. He
and
actually
a
gonna
child
become a
as
welder.
well.
That's right. And
Yeah.
the child was born. The child was actually at that point was about 6 months old.
So
And he was
everything to
happy.
live for.
Yeah, he
and
was
even when
happy.
you see videos that day, all he's doing is smiling.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and it looked like he comes from a family of positivity, dad, mom, like,
Yes.
and
Close-knit
smiling.
family.
So my thing with when your queen said that doesn't even sound like my son, that I'm gone,
Gone, yes.
and now he's been searched twice, and all of a sudden now he's in the back seat and he's handcuffed behind his back. He pulls a gun out that they didn't see during the 2 searches,
Right.
And he
And all they found
shoots
is weed.
himself
In the chest.
In the chest.
Yes.
Now I want everybody in here to take their hands and these handcuffs that they had. Now there's different kind of handcuffs. There's handcuffs that got a little bit of a chain link, and then there's the modern day handcuffs that they're really using now, where they're just locked in.
Wrist
A
to
Smith,
wrist.
Wrist to
and
wrist.
Wessons,
Alrighty.
hinge handcuffs.
And so you're like this. Alrighty, now, if you could take your hands and actually go around, and I mean you would have to have even more leverage because now you got to turn the gun around and shoot yourself
No,
in
you
the right
can't.
side of your
It's
chest.
Impossible.
And he's left-handed.
He's left-handed.
so he
See, that
wouldn't
was
have
the
used
part.
that side.
Yes.
If-
That was
oh
a
my
non-dominant hand.
He
How
would
do
never
you
have
argue
used.
science? Like you can't.
Right, he's left-handed.
And the coroner at that time, when we met the coroner 6 months later, right, he didn't know that my son was left-handed. See, so when he was telling me about that, you know, and I looked at him, I said, so you said the right side of his chest? He said, yes, the right side of his chest. I said, well, he's left-handed.
Is it true they didn't check for any gun residue in Victor's hands as well, right?
They checked his hands.
Right.
Now that's
Yeah,
that's where you
so
get
they say.
into right. You get into the situation where you have the young lady that I caught in many lies at the deposition who testified she did not go to the scene when in fact she had given a statement to the state police that she had gone to the scene. She bagged his hands and took photographs, but she lied and said she didn't go to the scene. She went to the hospital and she took a gun residue test. And so there were all type of discrepancies in the what happened to him. In addition to that, he had these marks over his left eye and the horseshoe ring around his left eye as though he had been hit with the butt of a rifle. And their only explanation to that was that he fell over and when he shot himself and hit his head on the cage that's in the
God.
in the cruiser, which made no sense because there's no way you can get a horseshoe
Yeah.
mark around your eye.
If anything, it'd be a bang or you'll grade yourself or you
Yeah,
just
you
slide
would just
down.
have like a little mark or something. You wouldn't even have that according to our expert other coroner that we
and
consulted
then
with.
his hands came back positive, they say. But it's so much going on that how do you believe this report when you already see so many lies? And then the actual officers, they were never tested for
Correct.
gun residue.
They were never tested
Not at
for
all.
gun residue at all.
And then as I'm watching it, now for one, he shot himself in the back, and then they ruled it a suicide for real.
Yeah, they concocted that
it was a
horrible
suicide.
story, and that's why I ended up naming that case the Houdini handcuff case, because short of being Houdini, who could shoot themselves in the chest?
And
In the
at
chest,
some
while
point-
Left-handed.
still handcuffed behind your back, and put your hand still behind your back after you've shot yourself.
Right.
Makes
Yeah, go right
absolute
back
sense.
in.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Reverend White, did you know that they said it was a suicide? Did they have the decency to come and tell you, call you, or did you? How did you find out that they said your son was sitting in the back seat of a patrol car with his hands behind his back, handcuffed, and shot himself in the right side of his chest?
Right,
Suicide.
We had left New Iberia, going back home. It's, again, you know, the 2-hour drive. The moment that we stepped out of my vehicle, got on my porch at home, that's when I got a call from a friend of mine, Pastor Darren Sofa, that was in New Iberia. And he said, well, man, you need to go on the Louisiana State Police website. They have a press release about your son. And so that's what I did. When I picked it up and said my son was involved in the fight at the high-end store, he became uncooperative. And when the officer was going to get help, he said he heard a single pop and there was a single gunshot wound to the back. He said my son was a single gunshot wound to the back. So I called the individual who had the article who did the press release. I called the state troopers, and he said, well, look, I only put in there what they give me to put in. And he asked me, did I want to talk to Lieutenant Trahan? And I told him, no, that's pitiful, which I was angry because of the fact is, I just left y'all, and y'all could not have the decency to tell me what you thought happened to my son. Then I knew then that it was a lie. I knew it was a cover-up because y'all wouldn't tell me. And then you had nerves enough to ask me, did I want to speak to someone different? No, I don't need to speak to anyone at this point.
Be lied to by another person.
So why would we need to do that? I said, well, no, we don't need to do any of those things. I say, but it is truly a shame because I know my son did not commit suicide. I know my son didn't kill himself. So, you can have it as that you may, but no. And so, again, we call Attorney Lexing same day again, did it in New Iberia, but then had to do it again because here the simple fact is we didn't know. And now all of a sudden, I told them, y'all got the World Wide Web. You didn't tell me anything, but in the World Wide Web, everybody else know what it is that you're trying to say.
So at no point when you were in New Iberia, in Iberia, no one said at that moment before you got in the car that it was suicide?
No, sir. Even in the hospital, when I asked the coroner, that pronounced him dead. I asked the supervisor that was handling the case, and no one told. They said it was still under investigation, nor in the hospital staff. Even though they let me talk to the individual that was over HIPAA, that they still telling me they couldn't release any information, couldn't tell me anything because it was under investigation. And even after that, when we called, even from that point on, no one contacted us from the State Police Criminal Investigation Division, Iberia Parish Sheriff, nor did the coroner's office contact us until 6 months later. No one informed us.
They gave them the runaround, which was totally disrespectful to him and his family trying to find out what happened to their child. What they did was, like I stated earlier, they jumped out there and tried to put their narrative and try to villainize Lil Vic with lies, nothing but lies. And then Reverend White finds out on the you said on the computer, on the internet, their story of what they put out saying what happened, which was not the truth.
Dude, how?
Because I went to the store when they said that. Like I said, once we got that part, I went to the actual store. I went to the high-end store, talked to the individual that was the clerk that night because initially they told me that it was the clerk that made the phone call. So I went to the store, and it just so happened that the clerk was there, and he told me that it was up to the owner whether they allow me to see the video. So again, when he did, the owner came. He said, "Oh, sure, you can see the video. I ain't got no problem with it." He said, and then he said, "We didn't call him." He said, "You go." So he brought the video. Well, no, he didn't bring. He brought it back. We looked at the video. I saw the fight. I'm looking at the individual. My son looked nothing like the people that was in the fight. And then on top of that, he showed me, brought me on the video. He said, "See, if we would have called," he showed on the video. He said, "If we would have called, it would show the number we called." So I'm letting you know right now, we didn't call anyone.
And when I seen the videos, when I saw the video as well, just inside the store, you could see Vic and his buddy kind of just looking out. Maybe the altercation was going on at that time. And not only was it video, it was an audio visual camera inside the store. And you can hear him laughing and having a good time. And if I'm not mistaken, I could hear him tell the little girl that probably didn't have some money, go get whatever you want. I'll pay for it.
That's the type of person Lil Vic was. That's what I said. That's the type of person.
Not knowing that the world is watching this. This is just him talking to a little girl, say, go get what you want. I'll pay for it. This isn't for the gram. This isn't, a social media story. This is just a 22-year-old man telling a child, go get what you want, I'll pay for it.
Right.
To walk out of that store and really walk
not even a block later when he comes right out the store, that's what he stopped him at. Right when he walks out the store, turns the corner, get ready to go right back to the apartment complex.
Now, when you look at this, and I want people to really watch the documentary Sugartown as well, but even the position of where they parked this police car at. For anyone that's had anything with the law, going to the police station, visiting the police station, going in, whatever it may be, when they arrest someone, they pull up to the front and there's a booking area. And that's usually in front, under the lights and everything. This was almost like on the other side of the parking lot, around the other side. Yes.
It was in the back parking lot in the area they call the blind spot where, see, you have to understand Iberia Sheriff's Department is a very corrupt sheriff's office. And they had a place in the back called the blind spot, which was the back parking lot in the dark where they would take people and do bad things to them. And that's where they took Lil Vic that night.
And that blind spot, once we fast forward a little bit, there's a lot of blind spots that we're going to talk about in this as well. So when they told you as a father that your son, that you've known his entire life, you know what your son is capable of doing. My son is 11 years old, and I know in 11 years with my son, I know my son. There's not too much that you could tell me from the outside and if you never even had any conversation with my son, that you could tell me about my son. So when they told you that your son said, I'm gone, and that your son killed himself, as a father, Reverend White, what did you say, or what were you thinking?
No, that I was infuriated because of the simple fact that now you're trying to insult my intelligence. See, because my son, as my wife stated, my son would have never said I'm gone or tell my family I love him, I'm gone, because we spoke every day. I talked to my son sometimes 3 times a day. My son had just got off work pulling a double. And he was looking at a vehicle, buying a vehicle. So when I called him, he was saying, he was talking about if something was wrong with transmission. So I was giving him some feedback on what to do. So when he said, I'm gone, well, no, so I already know, y'all can tell that to someone else, And so, like I said, I got even more enraged, at the mere fact that, first of all, I was down there and as a consultant and helping y'all. Now you taking my intelligence for granted and trying to tell me something that I know that is truly impossible, but you want me to believe it. And so, and I realized then that's a fantasy. Those other 8 individuals that y'all took to by the sugar cane field that y'all beat, and those families were afraid to come out. Well, I'm not going to be one of those types of families.
Were you ever afraid? Because knowing that there was so much above the law, Reverend White, were you ever afraid for your other family members or your safety?
Sure, not so much for me, because once you killed my son, that's my baby boy. Well, you kind of took the life out of me at that point. So it wasn't so much as me being afraid for me. But like I said, with my family, that was one of the reasons why I moved in the middle of the night from New Iberia, because, he had declared martial law with Hurricane Gustav. Sheriff declared martial law. And then we seen how his deputy was doing people, because he told me to get that. One of them told me to get the effing back on my porch. I called Sheriff Akal to let him listen at his deputy on the outside. And then he told me, so he said, get his name. And I told him, he said, I don't care if you talking to Sheriff Lewis Akal. I'm the law, and I'm telling you to get your ML back on that porch. And I'm standing in my yard. I said, no, sir, I'm standing in my yard.
Is this after?
No, this is before. That's why that's why we moved, because you could see that the climate that Louis Akal came into, and everybody, they used to call themselves the Akal thugs. They're supposed to be community police and riding in on bicycles, trying to, but they was intimidating people. They wasn't community policing as we know it. What they were doing, they was coming in. You could be walking down the street, and they take their baton and they would hit you. That's just what they did. They terrorized the community, let you know that, as Louis Akal said, there was a new sheriff in town, and his thing was not about law and order. It was about letting you know that I am the law. And that's what we started seeing. So, and then even though I was doing some things and they were aware of who I was, I told my wife, well, if they do that to us, imagine what these young cops gonna do to other people. So I told the best thing for us to do is to go out on leave, because they still consider us an outsider. See, so when they started telling me about that living, I don't even think they understood that was my son, because remember, they said he had his ID, but he didn't have his ID on him. See, so therefore, I really believe they didn't realize it was my son at the time the incident occurred. At the time they murdered him, they didn't realize that was my son until a little bit later on, because someone texted me that was working that night and told me that I really need to take a look at what has happened with my son, and we have a clear idea who it was, but she didn't want to come forward.
Now we're hearing the name Sheriff Akal. I want to go from now with your son being, murdered in the backseat, and they say it's a suicide. Sheriff Akal, let's get into what this mess is. Now, he's the sheriff at the time, and we'll get to where we are presently. But at the time, he's the sheriff. He comes in. There's a new sheriff in town. They're the kind of the good old boys. They're beating people. They're getting people. There's everyone is
they're going nigger knocking,
and that's what I wanted to get into when the nigger knocking, and this has been said. What exactly is the definition of that?
Well, nigger knocking is when you go into the neighborhood, into the black neighborhood, which was the West End. They would go out there one night a week, and he called himself taking back the street. And so they would find a black man or black men, and they would beat them, no matter what, beat them and charge them with resisting arrest.
at random. They even testified when they had Akal's trial that they will go and roll up in the black neighborhoods. They would get drunk. Talking about police officers getting drunk, rolling up in the black neighborhoods, and that randomly, if they see a black man walking down the street, they jump out their vans or whatever they're in, and they start beating them up because nobody's going to believe them because they live in the hood.
Yeah, and so who's going to do anything?
And who's going to do anything about it? And so,
and the sheriff even told him that, when you do that, make sure you charge them with resisting arrest. We had one of them, they beat him so bad, made him spit his blood up on the wall and made him lick his blood back off the wall. Those officers testified. One of them, he had did it so many times, had beaten so many. When the judge asked him, said, "Well, how many times do you think this happened? You did this?" He said, "I don't know." So the prosecutor said, 100 times. Is more than 100? Yeah, probably. And then they say 200. More than yes, more than 200. And see, so and all of it that was the climate. That when Louis Akal took over, that's what he did. As I said, I was doing some work down on Hopkins Street because again in the West End, man, and we were looking at putting computers into the housing, into the projects, but that he didn't want the grant money to go toward that. He wanted to keep it away, and so therefore, to me, what he wanted to do, he wanted to keep the oppressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now with Sheriff Akal, with Louis Akal, they're doing the most ridiculous things under his guidance.
Yes.
Like he knows what's going on. He's ordering. He's encouraging things. He's in a position where 2 officers came to him and said, "Hey, we got drunk. We beat up a black teen," and he said that sounds like a good old round of nigger knocking to me.
Yes.
So he knows what's going on.
Yes.
Now, for one, when you go to try to get Lil Vic's situation, his death, when you go and you try to say, no, this is wrong, what were you guys trying to do as far as legally? What were you trying to hold New Iberia, because it started off where, did you have a case first, Reverend White?
No, it was all.
In Louisiana, the law is very, I guess, kind of different from the rest of the states because we are under the Napoleonic Code, and the law only allows the child to bring an action and not the parents. So, but from an overall view, Reverend White and his family, what we were doing is, of course, we were going after the sheriff and anybody else that had anything to do with the killing of Lil Vic. So we wanted to make sure that anybody that had any contact with that, mostly Louis Akal and his deputies, to hold them accountable for the death of Lil Vic.
And so now you go through where we're starting to turn our attention towards Sheriff Akal.
Yes.
What are we trying to charge him with?
We were trying to charge him with murder.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely with murder, if deprivation of rights, violations of Lil Vic's civil rights. Yes, because he has, according to the 4th Amendment, he's deprived him of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he's killed this young man. So we go after him in what's called under what's Section 1983, which is a people that's acting under the color of state law, like police officers. In this particular instance, we went after them to file a civil rights case against them to hold them accountable in civil court for violating Lil Vic's civil rights. In addition to that, we also pursued and asked the Justice Department to get involved, which the former U.S. Attorney, Stephanie Findley, she actually did. She came in, and when she started investigating the case, that's opened the door of finding out all the excessive force and all the abuse that that exposed all the abuse and excessive force that Akal had perpetrated on other people and other victims and other people. And so our case basically was a catalyst to opening the door up for the exposing all the corruption of the Iberia Parish Sheriff's Office.
Now, we get into kind of the investigation into Akal now.
Yes.
And I know that they took, it appeared that something was going to happen to this man. It looked like it was a no-brainer.
Precisely.
That this man not only wasn't going to be the sheriff, it looked like he was about to get time.
Listen, he thought he wasn't going to be the sheriff. He was threatening to commit suicide himself at his office because he didn't want to be tried.
Mm. Yeah, and that's what an innocent man does.
I was gonna say, sounds like a guilty man.
Yeah, that's what an innocent man does.
Yeah, but the feds decided that they were going to try him because they knew that they had all the evidence and that they weren't going to lose this case. They had all the evidence to put this man behind bars. But you have to take in consideration the climate that we're under.
Yes.
When the jurors get the case, we've seen, like in the Trayvon Martin, they don't see things that we see that's glaring at us.
Right.
They make decisions on their own for whatever reason that has absolutely nothing to do with sometimes the case. That's my opinion from my observance of that particular
So
trial.
what was his charges?
His charges was he was charged with 1 count of conspiracy for violation of rights and 2 counts of deprivation of rights. So the conspiracy with is he encouraged his deputies. They conspired to go out and abuse and violate people's civil rights. And then the actual deprivation of rights is you deprived them of their civil rights when you went out and you did all these things to them.
And was it 4 different charges that
It was 3.
3. Okay, so 3 different charges on him. And then also there's surveillance and video footage inside of his jails where
Yes.
I was telling the neighborhood, I was like, man, it was one where the guy was down and he was already down, hands out, legs spread out, and they just kept releasing this dog on him and letting this dog and you could tell that there was so that they were in the inmate's head so much that they just continued cutting hair. Nobody
hair.
saw anything.
Everything
Like
else.
I don't want that. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we turned. Nah.
They made him face the wall,
Yeah.
like
yeah.
some slaves or something.
And
you
then
know?
they also in the chapel area, they were saying that there is a blind spot there.
No
and
cameras.
every person that said they took me to the chapel, they
Right.
beat me. One of the guys said they beat me for 15, 20 minutes. He said, but the most disrespectful thing was they spit in my face.
Right, and how they were actually able to get Akal in that particular instance is because they had cameras in the halls, and he stood in the doorway, and you can hear the audio where he's saying, "Kick that nigger," do all these, making all these racial epithets and do all these things to people, and that's how they have to basically be able to have a federal case. You have to actually catch somebody in the act, and because they didn't catch them in the act with Little Vic, the Justice Department didn't find that basically they had enough evidence to pursue him in the Little Vic's case. But they had enough evidence to pursue him in the other cases because they had him on video.
So Reverend White, you're thinking that, okay, I want him to go down, everybody to go down for what happened to my son, but also if by some crazy, let's get him, let's at least get him on this.
Yes.
So take me to the trial.
We go to the trial. We're sitting there, Reverend White, and we are observing the jurors. Because my perspective is, I can hear, because that's my job. I want to see, and I'm trying to analyze how these jurors are going to absorb all this evidence so that this man can be convicted. Well, we observe 2 young ladies. They showing the video of him standing in the hallway and making all the racial epithets. The jurors are doodling on a pen. One is looking down. Nobody's
Not
paying
even paying
attention.
attention.
One was watching a watch, and then the other one was pulling her
Just doing
jacket.
Just as
not
though
even looking at the video.
it didn't even matter to them. So that gave us an unction in my spirit that, wait a minute, something is going on here
Right.
that we don't really know about.
And even with that, Sheriff Akal, while in the courtroom, he dipping.
Oh,
He dipping
yeah.
and spitting in the cup right in the courtroom.
Were the jurors all white?
No, 9-3, 9-3.
9-3.
You're not. Sorry, this is more like a technical question. Can't you, in court, say, can you please play that back again and watch and
Make sure
point out? I would just be so angry. I guess I would want to point out that juror and be like, you need to pay attention.
But I wasn't the attorney. This is the Justice Department, the federal prosecutors that were prosecuting him on the criminal side for that particular case.
So frustrating.
And they are handling up on their business, trying to get it done. And it was just awful.
How long are you guys in court with Akal?
That trial was 4 days.
4 days.
That's it.
4
Well, I
days. And
think
what
trial
about
was
the
in 4 days.
deliberation?
The deliberation, it took them couple hours?
Couple hours because it's
They-
Friday.
and it really didn't take them
Friday.
a couple of hours. They had lunch.
Right.
We saw them moving back and forth. The bailiff was taking them. Looked like they were having a lot of breaks or whatever. And I said, okay, this and when the
it's
judge,
Friday, they ready to
it's Friday,
go.
they ready to go.
2 hours time, but they eating and walking.
Right. And then you got a foreman. If you have a foreman of a jury, that foreman can change the minds of people when they even actually think it's reasonable doubt. He can plant a seed in their mind. We don't need to be here. You need to go. This is the way we need to do it. And they had a foreman like that. No doubt. I had an opportunity after the trial was over with. They just so happened to were parked next to me. The foreman and two of the jurors that I had observed earlier. I asked them, why did you all, with all the evidence, how did you come back with a not guilty verdict on all 3 counts? It at least should have had a not guilty. I mean, he at least should have been convicted or found guilty on the conspiracy charge, because you had all the evidence, if nothing else, conspiracy. And the foreman told me he didn't feel that Akal had gotten really his hands that dirty, and that he let his deputies do all his dirty work. Now, and in my mind, that's conspiracy.
And out of all of the deputies right now, for those, we kind of skipped that in this, the deputies also came and said, yes, I did this. I did that. And how many deputies actually said... It was it 11 deputies?
Got 11 convictions on the deputies.
And so 11 convictions on the deputies. Not one conviction or guilty on the sheriff.
Not one.
They couldn't get the head of the snake.
Not one.
Unfortunately.
That's crazy because if, like, say I were to go in a car right now and I shot somebody up and Louis in the car with me, Louis is going to go to jail too.
Yeah.
Like, nobody gets away with that.
25 with an AR.
Right.
Of course.
Of course.
Wow.
And he had nothing to do with it. He didn't get his hands that dirty. He's still going to be incriminated.
But
don't be mastermind.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
You're going to get it because that's conspiracy.
Right.
And at the very least, he should have been found guilty of conspiracy. But you had this climate. We're in this climate. And this climate with the jurors is that they are not going to just prosecute police officers. Remember, he's the sheriff.
Right.
And
he's
so
the high sheriff.
He's
the leader. He's
the
leader. Remember, he sets the tax base in Iberia Parish.
And but I guess what made this case a little different is we did get an indictment from the head. You don't see too many sheriffs being indicted. That was a good thing, but what happened afterwards, him not being found guilty, and he gets reelected.
And he's still the sheriff of New Iberia Parish now.
Intimidating voters.
While he was under indictment, he got reelected.
But he intimidated voters.
And how was that?
He told them while running for reelection, right, when we was doing protests, we actually did a recall. And while doing that, he told those voters, remember now, if I get reelected, guess what? I'm going to remember you all. I know where you all are. And the other thing that was so insulting by this sheriff is that, while we protested, we could not get the people, to galvanize the people of Iberia Parish to go against the sheriff because they was afraid and intimidated. But yet and still, now he could feed them red beans and rice and chicken, and 500 of them would show up for him to tell them, right, that if y'all do vote against me, this is what's going to happen to you and your family. So be prepared. So if it does happen, and we couldn't. So all the rallies and protests we did in New Iberia and Iberia Parish, one was really only one time did the citizens of Iberia Parish really participate in it. Other than that, they didn't. And like I said, when they seen that he was reelected, we didn't have to worry about it anymore. That was no. Right. And once he got acquitted now, remember he went back, he was saying on TV, he sent the message on TV, when I come back, what I told y'all I was going to do, I'm going to do it, because he was saying to the officers, if any corrupt or so-and-so, I'm going to get rid of them. But remember, that was a message not to the true officers, that was a message to those individuals that voted against him.
Yeah.
Right, and so he got his base out, while he intimidates the other voters not to come out.
He looks like a terrible person.
Yeah, and I saw his deposition, how angry. Was that you?
That was me. And
he seemed so angry, and I'm surprised. Did he call you the N-word in there?
No,
he
didn't call me, but I was about to fight, and it was something. He got volatile. He was belligerent. When I put the heat to him about what he and his deputies did to little Vic, he just became unglued. I sit there and I told he had 2 attorneys with him, and I told him, you need to get your client, sit him down, because right now, this is it is not appropriate.
And he was flopping all
and he
over
was
the
flopping.
place.
He was tried to be very condescending and calling me baby, little girl, honey, little
my
things like
God.
that. So I had to
dude,
put him in check
would've
about
lost it.
that and still maintain my dignity and professionalism.
It was times where he was so upset that he was banging his finger and his watch kept popping off.
Yes.
And I'm
Right.
just sitting here like,
Because I put the screws to him and say, yeah, you and your deputies, they killed Victor White. And that he would come unglued. He would just come unglued. And John, at one point, he was like, I hate to say it, like Donald Trump was doing Hillary Clinton in that debate. He
Right.
got up and he was
Right.
pacing
Yeah,
over
pacing
me.
around.
And that's when I told his lawyers, sit your client down. I even told him, you need to sit your butt down. You got to sit down. You
and
sit
for
down.
the officers that murdered Vic, they never got any criminal charges.
No, that's still working today.
What?
But they're working at other
police departments.
Yeah,
That is
because
so scary.
at one point they were still in New Iberia,
Yes.
and now they're still officers
Yes.
somewhere else.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Unfortunately.
Akal is still the sheriff.
And
Yes.
Akal is still the
He's still
sheriff.
the sheriff.
Unfortunately.
Why do you continue to fight? Like, how do we continue this movement and bringing light to not just Vic, not just Lil Vic, but just to what's going on, period? Like, how do we get in touch with you guys to continue this journey?
Justice for Victor White page on Facebook.
Justice for Victor White.
Yes.
Justice for
On
Victor White.
Facebook.
And then Twitter, that's Justice for Victor White the third.
Justice for Victor White the
on
third.
Twitter. And like I said, also, we're there. So if someone, we're always as a monitor on there. So if they're trying to get in touch with us, so we're glad at Sugartown. See, one thing we hope for out of Sugartown is that individuals like yourselves and all over,
Right.
reach out to us because we need your help. We need your support because remember, we're in small town.
Yeah,
USA.
because at one point
You
it
know.
wasn't even a national story. You're like, man, we see these stories all the time. And how did this go from, you guys living this nightmare to saying, you know what, I think we got in touch with Investigation Discovery. There's a channel. They want to do a documentary.
Well, he reached
on
out
what's
to me
going on.
at the time. It was Zach Herman. He reached out to me after we did the New York Times article. We came out of New York Times February 2017 article, Nathaniel Rich, and from that, that's when Zach Herman of Stephen David Entertainment, which ID Discovery. So he had contacted me and asked me and was talking about the documentary. Got him in touch with our attorney. And so, and yes, and the same thing, when they came down and we started talking, they started filming, going into New Iberia, man, you would see the presence of the police every time we would come in. It's like the moment that we hit Iberia Parish, when we got into Iberia Parish, which is, led by New Iberia, once we got into Iberia Parish, you could look across the tracks and everywhere we went, we could see, even when they tried to be incognito, it's
there they
kind
go.
of difficult to hide a black and white, but
Yeah,
still
there
they
they
attempted
go.
to do it, but you could see it even at night when we did things at night. So like I said, once again, I wasn't afraid for my life. I was very careful and cautious because I had to go in and come out. But I tell you and so when they contacted us, I say, okay, now here this is a unique opportunity to relive it. Right, it was painful to relive everything that we went through and everything, how we were denied, how we didn't get any information, and then to go through it. So. It was an opportunity, unique opportunity that I've seen, so that I could become my son's legacy. My son should have became mine, but through the documentary, I purport that I will become my son's legacy. I'm his voice. They stopped his voice, but they hadn't stopped his voice through me.
I heard that. And the documentary is called Sugartown. And I got to ask you, Reverend White, with all the evidence, I mean, the video from the store, the camera somehow not being on in the police car. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
He turned it off. He admitted to that.
Yeah, the
Audio, video.
and video.
being
turned it
in
off.
the back seat and after searching someone twice is just wearing jeans and a sleeveless basketball jersey, and you search this man twice, and your main thing is you've been pulling black people over for probably your whole career and knowing how to search them. And then to say that the person reached back while they were in handcuffs, got over to the right side of their chest, shot themselves, and killed themselves. When you had all that information and when you found out that there was no prosecution, how unbelievable is that to you? Because you got to think, we got this.
Yeah, that's
Come
that's
on.
what I thought.
We got this because any man, not even anyone in the law field, legal, any person you walk up to and say, hey, this is what happened. They be like, man, that's impossible. That's impossible.
And they can never to this day explain where this gun came from. Not to, as we sit here this day. In this moment in time, they cannot explain to us.
And then one of the officers say he must have pulled it out of his out of crackhead's ass.
That was something Louis Akal would have said. So that's what I'm saying. That's probably where that came from, because that was one of Louis Akal's kind of terms, you know. But as you were saying, no, I couldn't believe it, even with Stephen Finney. Because here's the thing that got me is when we went in, we met with the Department of Justice. You know, we was told straight out to shoot. Right, only 2% of the officers are brought to a grand jury because they have to know the mindset of the officer. You know, so you know, and the other part that was disappointing and disheartening is the fact that when they did do it, you know, they told us it was going to be an independent investigation, and it wasn't an independent investigation. They got the information from Nabil Parish Sheriff's Department and the Louisiana State Troopers Criminal Investigation Division, and they reviewed it. No independent investigation. They reviewed it. So, you know, like I told them, I'm a licensed counselor. So therefore, if someone says that you got bipolar, they send me, someone diagnosed me before me, send me a piece of paper, say, review this. Right, not do an independent assessment of the person, but we want you to review it. And then when I look down, well, I'm looking down at the symptom. Okay, I'm gonna say that's bipolar. But if I interview that person myself, I may come up with something different.
Understood.
Right. So they just pass it from one set of eyes to the other set of eyes. The review.
Well, once again, I just want to let everybody, man, please watch Sugartown, man. It airs Monday, August 6th. I'm gonna tell you, Reverend White, I don't know how. You know, we don't know what we can do until we get there. And I know you had to have a lot of prayer, to get you through this, bro.
Definitely, that plus the support of the individuals from the Lafayette area as well.
I heard that. I got to ask you one question on Lil Vic, on his death certificate. To this day, does it still say like suicide?
It does. It does. Mm-hmm.
Man, all righty. Well, I thank y'all for coming into the neighborhood. It is a pleasure to meet you. The circumstances are horrible, but we will not be silenced, and we'll continue this for Victor White III.
We'll definitely appreciate that.
I appreciate you, man. God bless you, sir.
God bless you all.
Thank you.
Big Boys Neighborhood.